Hey everybody, it's Michelle and this is Queer Hustle, where we showcase queer entrepreneurs so we can learn from them. And I am so excited. Today we have Dr. Cadyn Cathers, founder of Affirmative Couch. Cadyn, you want to introduce yourself to the crew?
I would love to. So my name is Cadyn Cathers. My pronouns are he, his, and him. I am the director of the Affirmative Couch, where we provide online continuing education for psychologists about working with LGBTQIA clients, about working with polyamory, and working about kink in an affirmative way.
Such cool work and so very important. Why don't you tell us what led you to start this business in the first place?
So I am a therapist myself. I'm a psychological assistant in private practice. I'm still under supervision. And I'm also faculty in a program where I teach master's level clinicians. And one of the wonderful things about being faculty is I get to teach people at the beginning of their careers about what does it mean to be an affirmative therapist. But then they go, and we're one of the only programs that actually does that kind of work. But then they go out into the field and so many are like, oh, we have all this in-depth knowledge from our master's program. But then they go out and do continuing ed and they're like, oh my God, this is another training about pronouns. And I'm wanting so much more. Like I'm a trans person myself, been working with the community for about 10 years. So when I go to a training, I get super excited. I'm like, oh, there'll be something that maybe I'll learn. And then it's like, oh, let's talk about the difference between sex and gender. And I'm like, I got this. Like super important stuff. Therapists definitely need to know that, but there's so much work. So there was so much more to the work than just knowing that. That's the baseline. That's the foundation. You definitely need to know it, but let's move towards actually being able to help people with much more nuanced problems and really being able to train people to be excellent therapists. So that's part of the reason I started the couch.
Well, absolutely. And then so I'm going to annoy you by taking it back more simple now, which was exactly what you said, I don't like doing. But for those of us who are not in the therapy world, can you just talk to us a little bit about affirmative therapy and what that means to you?
Sure. So affirmative therapy is different than friendly therapy because I think, yes, most therapists definitely have an open mind. They're like, yes, I want to support my client wherever they are, but that isn't enough. I think to be a good therapist in working with diversity, you have to have training and you have to have consultation and you have to have experience. Just being open-minded, it's a great baseline, but it's not enough because even if you have an open-minded therapist and then they ask a question of, oh, what is genderqueer or what does that mean? Then the client then has to be put in the role of educating the therapist rather when they're paying them. And that's, in my mind, completely unethical. So it's on the therapist to go get that training. So in my mind, affirmative therapists have that training. They've also done the inner work. Because we do grow up in this world that has all this homophobia, all this biphobia, all this transphobia, all this racism, cissexism, endosexism, monosexism. There's so many isms and so many phobias that there's no way that we as therapists aren't going to have that. And so that has to be worked through in order for us to not collude or reenact our patients' own traumas. Because if they've got a lot of shame around, I'm not good enough because I'm queer, and if we have that belief too, we're not going to be able to catch it and we're not going to be able to challenge it. So yeah. That's another major difference.
Oh, absolutely. So we can see the importance of this. I put you on the spot with a little bit of a math question here and say, of all the therapists in the United States, what percentage of them would you estimate are affirmative?
So the estimates from Singh and Dickey from 2017 are that it's for psychologists, it's less than 30% have competence specific with trans and gender non-conforming people. My experience is it's less than that when I go around and ask that people think that they're competent because they went to a 1-hour training. And that's on one population. I think a lot more people think, oh, I have competence working with gay and lesbian people. There's so much bisexual erasure, so I think there's more invisibility of that community. Programs forget about polyamory all the time. That is definitely on the rise because it's estimated that around 1 in 5 people have actually tried polyamory at some point in their life and might be practicing at this current moment. That's a huge number of people. We're talking about 20% of the population, and yet there's so little training about working with that community. So that's part of the need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a bisexual polyamorous person myself, I can tell you that There's about, I would say 3 to 5 therapists here in the DC area where I live, and the names are passed around the poly community as poly friendly, poly affirmative, and queer friendly, trans friendly, and sadly those things do overlap in terms of those same 3 to 5 therapists. It gets a little tricky when you're trying not to see the same therapist as a partner is seeing or something like that. We definitely need more of them. So talk to us a little bit about how the couch is helping create more affirmative therapists.
So we provide online continuing education. So the nice thing about doing it online is then people who might not be able to go to a big conference, that's in, there's a ton of conferences, except that they're at a particular time of year. You have to travel there. And with the pandemic, that's even more of a problem. You have to pay for a hotel, then you go to the conference. And then often when you're at a conference, it's kind of like there's 5 talks and they're all at the same time about the topic you want. So we kind of take that out of it. We just have it pre-recorded so you can do it whenever you want. You can rewind it. You get the slides. Also, the advantage is, like, if I'm a therapist and I have a client that comes to see me and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, and I look for trainings, it can be really frustrating when I'm like, oh, I found a training about this exact issue, except it's in 3 months at a conference. This way it can be in real time. Someone can log in and get a training about whatever their specific topic is.
Yeah, and some of the topics that you guys cover get very specific. It's really interesting. Can you talk to us about some of the courses that you've released lately?
Yeah, so some of our most popular courses are ones that integrate a really popular theory with a particular issue. One of our most popular ones is about DBT, so that's dialectical behavioral therapy. That's a very popular modality of working. It was originally developed in the 1980s to work with borderline personality disorder, but it has since expanded to working with eating disorders, to working with depression, working with anxiety, working with trauma. And this course specifically deals with how to use those skills that so many therapists already have training in, but how to specifically work with microaggressions. The tenets of DBT are around distress tolerance. And if you are being microaggressed, you have to how do you survive that without imploding or without exploding? And how do you teach clients how to be able to not fall apart when that happens? Because unfortunately, we live in a world where microaggressions happen all the time. So that's a really popular course. Another one that we have is around helping transgender young adults develop self-compassion, because we do live in a world that doesn't teach us self-compassion, period. But then if you're trans and you're at a really important life stage, starting to go out on your own, maybe in college, something like that, there's going to be all these messages that you aren't good enough. So how do we help clients develop more self-compassion so they're not seeping in shame? So those are some of our more popular courses.
Absolutely. And not seeping in shame, very important. We know that's the least productive emotion. You, Dr. Cadyn Cathers, are probably the most productive person that I've ever met in my entire life. What drives you toward this? Why was this important for you to do in the first place? And what keeps you going like the Energizer Bunny that I know you are on a minute-to-minute basis every day?
Yeah, except I don't do, yeah. Mm-hmm. Although I can't keep a rhythm to save my life. I knew
you had flaws. Okay, we found one.
Yes, I have no musical talent whatsoever. I can't even sing happy birthday. It's embarrassing. People make fun of me. I think a lot of it was, I've been teaching this stuff for a while, and I love doing the beginner trainings. I do, but then people ask what's next. And I wanted to offer a place that we could do the what's next. I also wanted to offer a place where because a lot of trainings are done by people that specialize in doing trainings, and there is an advantage to that. But I really like to hear from people that are on the ground, the people that are doing the clinical work, not just the people that are good at training. And I have almost 20 years of teaching experience. And so part of what we do at the Couch is we take a team approach with the course development. So presenters that may not get support in how to be a good presenter get that support. Presenters that maybe want some extra support with creating graphics for the slides, they get that support. So that way the courses can be really great, and they can also elevate voices of people that are primarily clinicians and not just people that are the big names in the field.
Talk to me more about that, elevating the voices of people that are primarily clinicians. Why is that important? And is that harder to do? Is that harder to find people that are willing to do that and put themselves out there in that way?
It is a little bit harder, but a lot of the people that are doing trainings have their own companies as well. And one of the things that we really wanted to do at the Couch was have diversity of voices. Like I have my voice as a bisexual, polyamorous, transgender man, but I also work psychoanalytically. Not every therapist does. I primarily work with transgender people that have early childhood trauma. So that's also a very, very niche market. It's not just trans people as a whole. So what I have to offer isn't going to be what every therapist needs. And so having a site where there's lots of voices, lots of theories, lots of identities of presenters is really where the strength of the Couch is.
I love that. Let's shift focus for a second to the business aspect of this. This is quite an ambitious business model. And when you and I first started talking, I thought, I love this guy because I love anybody with a big master plan and something that's going to take years to build, and not everybody wants to do that, right? A lot of people, when they want to go into business, it's just, I want to trade my services for dollars, and how can I do that efficiently? And then those are easy to stand up. I get excited as a business nerd when I talk to someone like you who wants to do something more complicated, more complex. But obviously that's its own psychological challenge. You've got a really ambitious business model. It's going to take a while to get really profitable, especially if you want to make this affordable and accessible to people. How do you keep going yourself psychologically, knowing that the prize is down the end of the road, down a little bit further?
I think it's with the small wins of noticing that the mailing list is growing, noticing that people are excited. We've run discussion groups, so people talking about it, seeing comments of like people referring to our trainings, seeing the feedback about the trainings. Those are all the little wins that help me keep going around seeing the big vision. I think another big part is I'm working. This isn't the only thing that I do. So I have other things that help sustain me financially so that I don't have to be worried about, oh my God, is the business making money, so that I can really invest in building the foundation for the business and still be okay personally.
And not for the faint of heart, by the way, because you work more than anyone I know and work more jobs than anyone I know all at once as an entrepreneur. I definitely, you're doing it. You're pulling it off. Most people, I say, I don't recommend trying to do all of these things at once. Let's figure out how to prioritize. How do you think you have such a superhuman ability to do more than other people, frankly?
Actually, I think this is a very strange consequence of my ADHD. Because I am always seeking stimulation, and running a business gives you lots of things to stimulate you, because anytime you get an email, you need to respond. Also with content creation, there's the excitement and the creativity of how am I going to communicate what's super important. Recruiting presenters, I'm also getting to meet all these amazing people, and recruiting authors. I get to meet lots of amazing people in the field that aren't necessarily local in my immediate network. That keeps me going. I think it's also that I'm just passionate about this. There's something about this work that feeds me. And I think if that wasn't the case, I don't think I could do this or work as many hours as I do.
And I love talking about ADHD and entrepreneurship. I have it too. And that really resonated with me a ton, especially the part about I can't let an email notification go. I shouldn't say that publicly, because then everyone will email me and expect the response immediately. If I see a notification, I know if I don't answer it right now, that it's going to get buried, and so we end up, stimulus, ping, 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 ping. Mm-hmm. And, we know that the Venn diagram of people with ADHD and entrepreneurs is basically a circle. We tend to do really, really well at entrepreneurship, and especially because we get so passionate and hyper-focused about the things that we love. I do want to make sure for people listening to this and watching this that they're not feeling ashamed or less than if they're not, people that want to work 20 hours out of every 24-hour day, and that's okay to work at a more sustainable pace, but that you're working all the time, and I work quite a bit as well, because we do love it and because we have a passion for it. What would you say to somebody watching this and listening to us and say, well, that's really intimidating. I don't think I can work like that. So entrepreneurship isn't for me, maybe.
So I think you have to find a business model that works for you and your style, because the way that I set up the business was that I wanted it to build to be this huge library. I started with an ambitious project. But I think you can run a business where it's just you and your course and that's it. Or you and your consulting, whatever it is your product is or your service line is. So you just need to make it something that actually works for you. Some people, it might be smaller and less ambitious, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that for me, it's also that I'm thinking about long-term growth. I'm thinking about the future, which is also not exactly an ADHD trait. So this is where I have other things that have to come in. I think the other thing that sustains is like, I have support systems. I have a team that works with me. I have a team that supports me because yes, there are things about ADHD that are really great in entrepreneurship, and there are things that are not so great. So I try and find people that can work with me, not just for me, but with me, to help the business be successful and help me be successful and help them be successful.
I think that's such an important point. And the very first person that I ever hired, my admin assistant, was to do things that maybe are seemingly simple, but that were very difficult for me as an ADHD person. The very first thing she started doing was scheduling my time and managing my calendar, because for somebody who most people consider intelligent and who can do, high level strategic thinking, I really struggle with like just not double booking stuff on a calendar sometimes. So just being able to know these things about us and ourselves and find someone else that's good at that type of thing and likes that type of thing and steps in. So important. What are some of the ways that your team supports you, or things that you're not the best at or they aren't your favorite, that you're able to find someone else that's great at and comes in and bolsters you?
So I have Teresa. So Teresa does editing for making sure there's no typos and those sorts of things, because I'm great at creating. I'm great at the big ideas, but sometimes those little details can be quite difficult. And so having someone that has that kind of editing background. And so this is where we don't just do copy editing. We're also thinking about brand voice. We're also thinking about big picture. So I can bring that to her and she can bring back making sure the little details and there's not a typo somewhere and that things are not awkward, can be very helpful. So that's just one example.
Yeah, absolutely. And then when we talk about our team, right, we're not just talking about our team at work. We're also talking about our team at home, our friends, our community. You're a newlywed. How important is it to have, I know, congrats on that, by the way.
Thank you.
How important is it, in your opinion, to have a supportive partner as an entrepreneur?
I think it's essential. Like, I don't think that I would not have been able to start this business or sustain this business without support from Melissa, my wife, or my mom, because she's helped kind of more with financial components of this and getting some capital. Melissa's helped with some of the task-oriented stuff. She's helped when I'm having like a freak out of like, oh my God, this is so scary. This is such a big project. What have I taken on? She can help me take a deep breath and be like, you're good. You know what the vision of this is. It's just right now you're in the trough of sorrow. It'll be fine. We'll get through the trough together. Here's some popcorn or whatever comfort food is good for the moment. Or a snuggle or a petting the cat or whatever it is. If it wasn't for that, the Affirmative Couch wouldn't be, period. Like it would never have started.
Yeah, absolutely. And entrepreneurship is such a roller coaster. Like you said, you get that stimulation, you get those big highs and those big wins, and we go woo, and then something happens and we go oh woo. And it's hard to live with us, I think, sometimes, to have a partner or partners that are able to say, hey, this is a big vision, this is what you're going for, and by the way, every other time you've ever freaked out, you figured it out, it's worked out fine. So important. I want to go back to that sort of financial piece you touched on, because we kind of walk an interesting line. I talk to people both ways. I talk to people that have no capital or access to capital and think, oh, I can't do this because I don't have the money to start up, and the only people that can do this, have family money or have savings or have a bunch of money, and that's absolutely not true. On the other hand, this myth of the Goliath bootstrapped entrepreneur, or this hero, is so pervasive in our culture that people who do have resources and access to resources are sometimes afraid to leverage them because they feel like they're not doing it well enough or they're not doing it right if they rely on capital, which I always also think is dumb. Obviously, if we have resources to leverage, we should leverage them. Where do you fall on that?
It's complicated because well, you should always leverage, there's so many things that you can leverage. You can leverage your support system. You can leverage capital. You can leverage your own skill sets. You can leverage employees. So I think it's really about thinking strategically about what is the best move. How am I going to use the resources that I have at my disposal, there we go, to do the best work that I can. What's going to be the most effective? And I think this is where sometimes we get stuck in the nitty gritty of where am I going to find the capital? Like, how am I going to find it for whatever we're wanting to create or do, that misses the big picture. And this is, again, where I'm a big picture kind of guy. I think that when you step away, that's when you can kind of find the solutions that you didn't think were there. And it can be thinking about a different strategy of how to leverage that money. It can be looking at, oh my God, like, yes, keeping this money in savings, yes, it's earning a little bit of interest, or even keeping it in investments and earning a little bit of interest. But if I actually moved it and leveraged it in this way, I would make so much more money. Like, that takes moving out to see the opportunity cost that is lost of not making that move. And I think that also people, particularly queer people, get a lot of messages around not being good enough. And we also get a lot of messages around money. Because not good enough and not valued enough and money are going to be two related psychologically things. And we hear messages about underemployment. We hear messages around discrimination in the workplace. We hear those things, and then it becomes that we're going to go into a scarcity mindset with our money. And when we go into a scarcity mindset, we're not making good decisions. We're not going to be thinking long-term. We're not going to be thinking about, is this actually true? Is this real, or is this a message that some fill in the blank swear word told me about myself?
Absolutely. And I love that thought, that concept of thinking of our resources holistically, because that's really what it is. People will look at it and say, I don't have enough money or to start, or I don't know how to get money to start, and so I can't start, instead of looking at their resources holistically, because money is one resource, but so is your network, so is your energy. If you're young and starting out, then you're going to have more energy than someone that's older. If you're older and starting out, you're going to have more experience and more knowledge than someone that's younger. That's a resource as well. What are all the resources at our disposal, and what's the most efficient way to leverage them? Absolutely. So a lot of people that watch this and listen to this are people that are just starting out, or people that are, thinking about starting something, that haven't started something yet. Maybe they're afraid to, or they're kind of like on the fence on that decision. Obviously, we're talking to queer entrepreneurs here. What advice do you have for people that are just at the beginning of their journey?
So I think that getting someone to talk to around kind of operations, talking about strategy, talking about those things is super important. And this is where my bias is going to come out as a psychotherapist. I think being in your own therapy can be hugely helpful, because if there are those internalized messages of not good enough, of shame, of not being able to ask for your worth, when sending a proposal or a quote to a client, those are things that can be worked through in therapy, because that's where we can build foundations and kind of fill in some of those cracks that came out from childhood, especially as queer and trans people, because we didn't get support systems in the same way growing up. And so those messages need to be worked through. And I think therapy is a great way to work through them, with an affirmative therapist, I should say, too.
Absolutely. Get yourself an affirmative therapist. I love that advice. Dr. Cadyn Cathers, founder of Affirmative Couch, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure having you. And everybody else, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.